I just want to thank everybody again for coming, and I'm going to share briefly. Some of you know Farm Stew, some of you don't, and so I'm going to try to catch us all up quickly, and then also share some of the highlights from this year. And I am going to video this because I want to share it with other people, so hi other people that might be watching this in the future. So if you ask a question, feel free to interrupt because I do want this to be interactive, but I'll try to repeat what you say so that everybody can hear. And yeah, so we'll just jump right into it. There's a verse up here. It's our theme verse, which is John 10:10, and it's Jesus talking, and he's saying, I came that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. And this verse is a two-part verse, and I'm just sharing up here the second half. But besides Nathan, who's our pastor, who knows the first half of this verse? Fritz is a former pastor, so he's disqualified. But anybody know the first half of this verse? Okay, the first half, Carissa, okay, she can say it.
The thief comes to steal and to kill and to destroy.
Okay, so there's a thief who comes to do nothing but kill, steal, and destroy. And I like to establish that because I believe that the hunger, disease, and poverty that Farm Stew is working against is not God's original plan for humanity. We were born and created in a garden. There was abundant food, there was pure water, there was nature, there was exercise, there was fellowship, and that's what we were made for, and that's what we're going to return to someday. And in the meantime, we're in the middle of this great battle with this thief, or you could say Satan, that wants nothing but to kill, steal, and destroy. So that's kind of the theological underpinning for Farm Stew, because we want to be on the right side of that battle and really work towards helping people have abundant life. And sadly, there are 3 billion people on the planet right now that even if they spent half of their money, like half of everything they made on food, they still couldn't have a healthy diet. So 3 billion is a lot of people. It's a good 40-some%. And a diet is considered unaffordable if it takes more than 52% of their money. Can you imagine having to spend 52% of what you make just to eat? That's the situation for 3 billion people on the planet. So those people are concentrated in certain parts of the world. And you can see on this map, it's really predominantly sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia is where people are suffering the most. We know that there's hunger in the United States. There's hunger in every place in the world, and especially malnutrition. Mal just meaning poor or bad. Like in Spanish, mal is bad. If a lot of our diets, of course, as a public health nutritionist, that's my training. When I look at people's carts in the grocery store, I think that's malnutrition. So my kids say I'm kind of judgmental in the grocery store, but I don't say it, I just think it. But these are places where the kids often, you're looking up to 75 to 100% of the people in these countries that are on the dark purple or red that can't afford a healthy diet. And there's also numbers in these same areas where 1/3 of the children in those areas are severely malnourished. So that's our target population. And I already went through the recipe of Abundant Life. You guys know it now, and you have a take-home cheat sheet. But this farming, attitude, rest, and meals, sanitation, temperance, enterprise, and water, we have found now, and it's one of the most exciting things for me is that I came up with this acronym 7.5 years ago while laying on the trampoline behind my house one Saturday or a Sabbath afternoon, and I was just reading about different practices that make people healthy, and I just started thinking, there's got to be something that would help poor people, because that's been kind of my passion since I was really in my early 20s. And so these letters just started coming into my mind, like, hey, that would be important, that would be important, just from international development work that I've done. And all the letters came to mind except for the E for enterprise. I credit that now to a woman who is now living in Malawi and is one of our partners. And you'll see we have a tree project going with her as part of our enterprise work. So she's the mother of enterprise, and now she's our first big enterprise project. I mentioned that we're not just about teaching a man to fish, but teach a man to farm and much, much more. And this quote really inspires me. It says, when right methods of cultivation are adopted, there will be far less poverty than now exists. We intend to give the people practical lessons upon the improvement of the land and thus induce them to cultivate their land, which is now lying idle. You know, people think there's not enough food on the planet, but there's land all over the planet that is lying idle, that if it was properly cultivated, people could eat. And this woman, Ellen White, who's a key person in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, of which I'm a member, and Fritz and Nathan and the Cransons, she says, if we accomplish this, we shall do good missionary work. And I really like that, because a lot of what Jesus did in his life was actually healing and promoting health as well. But that often doesn't get talked about in most church-type settings, and I'm thankful that it does in mine. And so I mentioned, a couple people were asking me, are you a training of trainers program? And I probably, Sarah's so sharp, she said that, and I should always say that in the first sentence when I talk about Farm Stew, because that's what we are. And this was in South Sudan in February. I was there. This is Mary, and this is our rainbow plate. And so we had done a training of trainers, and this was a lesson that we did on meals. And I can tell you most of the diet of the poor is white food. Can anybody think of the white foods that is like the staple of so many countries? Rice, white bread, potatoes, corn. And in developing countries, you get your cassava and your plantains. Yeah, and they're all white, starchy foods. And as a nutritionist, I can tell you the way that your body metabolizes those foods is as if it's sugar, like just straight table sugar. So there's maybe a little bit of fiber in some of them, but like, you know, the corn porridge that Africans are getting like 50% of their calories from, you might as well just like be taking sugar. And so the diabetes, the heart disease, even the hemorrhoids, stuff like that is just, the numbers are raging, and cancers and everything. It's just raging numbers because they're not eating this rainbow. And they don't even know. That's the sad thing. Like, pretty much everybody in America knows you should eat vegetables and fruit. Like, we may or may not do it, but we know we should. In a lot of these places, they don't even know. Like, the goal for a mom is to fill the bellies. And as long as the person walks away from a meal and feels full, like, she's done her job. And that is a major accomplishment for a lot of people. But it's not going to help them prevent disease. And when they get disease, it's not going to keep them alive. So here we're teaching how to make a very special thing. We have a mortar and pestle over there. Same thing. They actually have soaked soybeans. A lot of the children have protein deficiency in a very severe form. And so soybeans have almost a perfect protein. And they're pounding them, and they can make soy milk. This milk is like the green cow, is what they've termed it in a lot of these communities. And I can tell you it has saved so many lives, especially of children, when they go from the breast milk, which is obviously the best food for them, but when they're weaned, they often go straight from breast milk to corn porridge, and that's it. So there's like almost no protein. So you see the childhood mortality just spike as they are weaned. And there's a disease called kwashiorkor. Has anybody ever heard of that? Okay, it's not, no, most people don't talk about it, but it's a protein deficiency. And the word in the local language, yeah, they're bloated, they're puffy. You can even, the test for it in our manual is you press their feet down, and if there's still a dent in the skin after you lift your fingers up in both feet, they have kwashiorkor. And that disease kills so many children, and like milk or the soybean itself can prevent it. And people get very excited. Milk is kind of a high prized commodity, and yet most people can't afford it. So to be able to make milk out of beans, you may or may not like soy milk, that's fine. I'm not going to debate soy milk here because we have so many options, but they don't have options, and they love it. So yeah, so this is the training. So at this training, I'm in the middle, the white lady. There's another white guy, he's a Zambian. So I was alone here. The woman, Doreen, in the yellow, she's our head trainer from South Sudan. And she's been working with us since 2018. And a number of the people, a few others have been with us for a long time, but this was a whole new group. And I'll tell you, there's a couple people on the side here in the brown shirts. They are our newest trainers in Sudan itself. And we have some people on my board there right now doing a training of trainers in Sudan. So we're really expanding. And God is, I think, really blessing what we're doing. And people are getting excited. Like, I'm not having to sell it. It's selling itself. This is my team on the international side. And I just shared this because I was saying I have kind of a two-dimensional life. Like, I'm here in Paonia, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday mornings, and often Thursday mornings too, Carissa, who I should say is also on the team. I took this picture before she was waking up at the 6 o'clock mornings. But Elizabeth is in Texas, but she's from Bolivia, and she's worked all over the world, including Africa, for like 12 years. Charles is from Burundi. He's our finance guy and just a brilliant, very dedicated man. And Audrey is from the Seychelles. Does anybody know where that is? It's where, Steve?
East of Africa, southwest of India.
Yep, north of Madagascar. So, yeah, so she's an amazing person, British citizen actually. And this team, I'm so blessed. This time last year, I didn't have any of these people full-time with us, and now all three of them. So this is partly why this year has been so amazing, is because of these folks. Another concept that inspires us is this one. It says, you may give to the poor and injure them because you teach them to be dependent. Instead, teach them to support themselves. This will be true help. The needy must be placed in positions where they can help themselves. So that's really our goal, is to like equip, empower, you can call it whatever you want, but to place people in a position where they can help themselves. And we just really believe and live by the motto that families can thrive, even in very difficult circumstances. A few years ago, before I even started the program, like when I was there in October of 2015, I was just there as a volunteer with the USAID program, and I was it was before Farm Stew existed. I was there as a board member for another organization that I was on their board. And I remember being in a village, and they had done some really good international agricultural development work. And this guy in one of the meetings looked at me and he said, "You've made us wealthy right where we are." And, you know, you'd look around in this village and the kids, you know, were in their little flip-flops that probably cost 35 cents, you know, and they, you know, it wasn't like nobody was living large, but the kids were healthy and they felt wealthy. And so their expectations are not like, you know, I'm going to retire and vacation in Europe every summer or whatever. If they can send their kids to school, if they're, you know, can stay healthy, if they have clean water and a decent shelter, like they feel blessed and appreciative for that. And so that's something that we feel like it's just the basics. It's not that much to ask that these people could have the basic things that they need. But it's also, it's not them demanding that they deserve it because it's a right. It's saying, no, you can create this in your own life. So I'm super excited about this map. Like I said, we really grew a lot this year. And Carissa, would you mind passing these around? There's more on the table. In here, the same map is in here. And there's a chart in there that's kind of a lot to read, and I probably should make it more of a graphic rather than a chart with a gajillion numbers. But it just shows our growth over the last 7 years. We celebrated 7 years in October. But you can see we're still fairly concentrated in Africa. Our biggest, most costly programs are in Uganda and South Sudan. The South Sudan program, South Sudan being one of the poorest countries in the world, cost Farm Stew this year of $500,000. So I'm sitting in this little farmhouse on Zoom, and somehow God is blessing us with $500,000 just to send to South Sudan alone. Our Uganda program was $350,000 this year. The other programs are more related to partnerships, so they've been on a much lower scale, but there's so much desire for us to scale up in all these different countries. So it's pretty intensive Pretty intensive work. And again, I hope some of you for whom this theology stuff might not be inspiring, but it's very inspiring to me and to the people that work for the organization. And maybe this is a different spin on theology that maybe you've had before, but Jesus, when he was opening his ministry, I consider this his mission statement, because it was kind of how he started. And he said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to preach the gospel," or good news, some translations say. So the gospel is supposed to be good news. And you have to ask yourself, who is it supposed to be good news to? Because Jesus really defined a certain audience. And the who it's supposed to be good news for is the poor, the heartbroken, the prisoners, blind, and those that are oppressed. And it's supposed to be good news that leads to freedom. So this is Joy's official paraphrase of this verse. So you can go check it out for yourself. It's Luke 4:18 and 19. But to me, I feel like that is a lot of what he did in his lifetime, reaching out to people like that and encouraging his followers to reach out to people that were in difficult circumstances. So I feel like that's what Farm Stew is trying to embody, is figuring out how we can be good news to the audience that Jesus told us to focus on. You know, every mission or organization has a certain target audience. And so this is ours. So we try to lead people to freedom, and we have 5 freedoms. That might be my phone even, so you can turn it off. We have 5 freedom priorities, and I just want to run through them and give kind of a quick example of each of them. The first one is freedom from dependency. So it's that idea that like the world owes me something and I'm going to wait for it to show up. And sadly, even in a marriage relationship, often that's the case. I want to show you this picture back here. This is Peruzzi is the woman here, and the man is David, and Robert in the green shirt. Our Ugandan trainers wear green. Robert is one of our agronomists, and when he came, he met Peruzzi, and she was dirt poor and really kind of angry and in a very bad way with her marriage, because her husband is a shoe cobbler and he was not making enough money to be able to send the kids to school or to take care of Peruzzi. So she was ticked. And, you know, when Robert first said maybe she should try farming, she thought that was below her. And it was, you know, it's kind of like children's punishment in Africa often, you know, go out and dig. They call it digging. And it's like something for the lower people. And, you know, if you do good in school, you aspire to go get a desk job in a government office somewhere, and then you've arrived, right? So when Robert suggested farming, Peruzzi was not interested. But eventually, and really our training is about behavior change, because people can know things in their mind, but if you don't believe it in your heart and if you don't practice it with your hands, it's not going to do any good. We all know that, even about like diet or exercise or whatever. You know what you should do, but whether or not you do it is a totally different story. So he got her to try it. And Peruzzi says that this was her like life's changing point. She's now like doing not only gardening for herself, but has a nursery where she's cultivating plants. So because it's tropical, you can have a crop all year round. So she has the whole system going, and then she's also selling to neighbors, and they're collective marketing to others now. And their relationship, of course, has totally improved a lot. So the families can thrive. And so she was sitting around dependent on her husband for bringing home the, you know, bacon, but he wasn't doing it. And so there's so many stories of women like that where the marriage was even abusive because, you know, and just a mess. And now because the woman finds a way that she can start contributing to the family economy, their marriage can actually be improved as well. So that's just one example of freedom from dependency. What we try to lead to with freedom from dependency is what we call Farm Stew certified homes. And so I don't have time to go into all the details. There is an article in the newsletter about the Farm Stew certified homes, but basically we have like an indicator for each letter to show that they've achieved the goals of the program. So for farming, they need to have a garden with 3 or more different kinds of vegetables. For the meals, we actually take measurements of the children's mid-upper arm circumference to make sure the kids are not malnourished. Stuff like that. They have to have a latrine, et cetera, et cetera. So we certify the homes, and these people are all getting their certificate. So this one I'm especially proud of, and I can't remember if it's in this newsletter or not, but this is in a part of South Sudan that's very remote and very poor, like very, very poor. Like the United Nations was expecting famine in this area. And these are all certified farms to homes now, growing their own food and like really being at a totally different place. And Doreen, the FAR trainer that I said that was in the yellow shirt, she was just up there last month, and she had been up there the year before. And she said it was just absolute night and day difference between the children. And she showed me some pictures. I need to pull together, Krista, that make a note. We need to pull together before and after report for up in that area. It's called Yay. And the exciting thing to me is that most of the non-governmental organizations that work in South Sudan, they get a lot of money, they buy a lot of stuff, they hand out a lot of stuff, and people never change. They even pay people to come to their training classes. So when Doreen first showed up, people were annoyed with her because they said she was eating the organization's money, because she's not a thin lady, she's a little plump. And they said she was eating the organization's money. Where was their money? They wanted money. And she said, we don't hand out money. If that's what you want, go home. If you want knowledge, stay. And this time when she went, they said, we don't want anything from you but more knowledge. So there's been 2 trainers on the ground there in that area this whole year making that type of transformation. So the second freedom we shoot for is freedom from shame. And this is an issue I didn't know anything about, even though I went to Johns Hopkins, did my degree in public health. This is a major public health issue that I had no knowledge about whatsoever. And that is that when girls start their periods, they drop out of school. And it's happening by the millions and maybe higher numbers than that, but hundreds of millions of girls dropping out of school because they have no way to manage their menstrual hygiene. And it can be stopped very easily. This is a letter from one of the little girls that we provided with these packs of pads. They're washable cloth pads made in Uganda by an enterprise that we really believe in. It's a social enterprise, and so it's employing all these other Ugandan women making their own pads. We've also brought other pads that American women have made to Cuba in a shipping container a couple years ago. And actually we brought a bunch more of those this year too. Elizabeth Kreidler, the one who speaks really good Spanish, did that this year. So we've, over the years, helped provide 20,581 girls with pads. And this is Betty Mwesigwa and Fiona in the green. Those are 2 of the original Farm Stew trainers that I'm happy to say I hired 7 years ago. I had no intention of starting an organization, and when I was there, I just felt like God told me to hire these local people. And the 5 local people that I hired 7 years ago are still with us today. So they love what they're doing, and they're really helping to expand the work too. The third freedom is the freedom from drudgery and disease. So that's the focus on helping cook stoves. People are hauling wood and water. So we help with them with wells. So this is pictures of wells, the water that they're getting right now, which is just scary, and the building of a well. It's very low tech wells, and we try to do it with the village drill. I didn't include a picture of the village drill, but we have a equipment now in Uganda, and we have one in the Philippines that's a hand-powered drill. So it's pretty cool because they can do it themselves and have some skin in the game of their own thing. If you want to look it up, village drill is pretty neat, or I can send you a link to it. But we also contract with other groups that have big rigs too in places where we need that. But we've put in, thanks to generous support from donors, 71 wells over the last 2.5 years. And that's helped 20,000 people. And this guy, it's a story of an older guy who was 102 years old and had never had clean water. And he was just amazed at what it was all about. And Perez, the guy with him in the green, is our lead trainer who does the village drill. So he's our water guy, but he's also an agronomist. And I'm about to hopefully send him to the Philippines to train them on how to use it. So we're working on the details there. Okay, so the first three freedoms, freedom from dependency, freedom from shame, and freedom from drudgery and disease, were freedom from things. The last two are freedoms to do things. So the freedom to share is really how we want to share. Of course, here they're sharing, these are soy scrambled eggs. I didn't even know what that was. For the first 6 months, they started making it. Anybody want to guess what soy scrambled eggs would be called here? Tofu. Yeah, they take the soy milk and they coagulate it using lemon juice and a little bit of salt. And suddenly it becomes scrambled eggs. And again, a very high-end product from their perspective. To get eggs is like a big deal. So if you advertise it as tofu, nobody knows what you're talking about. But nutritionally speaking, it's actually pretty legitimate to call it soy scrambled eggs. And they love it. You can see what this was at a meeting and everybody's like, give me just a taste, just a taste. So, but what we also want to really share is our curriculum. So this, for example, is in the Philippines, where we have it translated into Tagalog. This is the English version, and I don't know why that picture's flipped, but yeah, so we have manuals that we're printing all over the world now. And we also have a flip chart, which Carissa brought over there and set very carefully behind the table. But anyway, it's a visual aid that we have that can help people. Do you mind grabbing it real quick? So we have that translated now in English, Swahili, Arabic, Juba Arabic, which is the Arabic that they speak in South Sudan, Spanish, Portuguese, French, and of course English, and probably something else I'm forgetting. So anyway, you can come in front actually. So it's a pretty neat thing. It's like a waterproof paper, so the trainers can take it around. They can teach what is the acronym. Thank you. And yeah, and so then for each lesson that we have in the manual, we have a visual aid, so that most of the audiences that we're working with are not literate. So everything tries to be very much in pictures. This was probably one with the most words. How to plant the soybeans and like making a compost pile. So this obviously is the farming section. Maybe we skip a little chunk forward. Yeah, this one is about choices, like lifestyle choices and what they lead to. Kind of people don't really know that much about even sugar and the effect of sugar on your teeth, stuff like that. So just showing kind of the processed foods. This one is about forgiveness, a lesson about forgiveness. So it's called the 4 R's: revenge, retaliation, rejection, and resentment. And you'd be surprised, so much of the refugee situations, tribal warfare, that kind of stuff, it's all really boils down to a lack of forgiveness and just these, Hatfield and McCoy type feuds that are going on between tribes and over multiple generations. This one teaches about the Sabbath rest. And yeah, just all different ones. This is kind of a parables type story about how a farmer would bring their crops to the market or bring it to a grinding mill, and how the miller actually takes the most nutritional part, the bran, and feeds it to the chickens. So the person pays the miller to mill their food. They come back with a lot less food, and it's less nutritional. Meanwhile, the chickens are getting fat and happy because they're eating the healthy part of the food. And then just talking about how, the kids get sick. So here he's feeding the chickens. You pay the miller to rob you, basically. That's how we teach people to think about it. Because in most cultures, the whole grains is thought of as animal food or food for poor people. The milled, white, refined grains are thought of as the prestigious thing. But nutritionally speaking, it's the other way around. So we try to teach that in like a little parable. And yeah, I think it's very effective. done that in a lot of ways. This is like a weaning food, teaching how to wean. Like I mentioned, the breastfeeding, you go straight to corn porridge. Well, we teach a recipe of what you can make for a weaning food to go. So that's just a quick idea, but that's the type of curriculum that we want to share. And like these are about $50 to print them at a really high quality waterproof paper with a stand and everything like that. So trying to get that out there to our trainers so that they have the tools they need to visually make the point that we're trying to convey. The last freedom is the freedom to grow. And this is Fiona, one of our original trainers, with a young man that was totally addicted to alcohol and smoking and was really kind of getting nowhere with his life. And Fiona is working with him now. Anyone want to imagine the business that he has started now? Yeah, it's a weird kind of vegetable, right? Somebody said it. I think I heard. It's a loofah sponge. So you can grow loofah. I actually grew them a few years ago. It was really kind of fun. They're just a regular squash, and then you let them get really, really dry, and the outer flesh kind of you can peel off, and on the inside you have this amazing loofah sponge. So yeah, so just really trying to encourage like small business, value added businesses. So he doesn't sell the squash, he actually goes and cleans them up. And so there's a lot of different businesses that we've helped to start, but this is the one I was telling you, the mother of our E for enterprise. We helped start a sustainable tree farm in Malawi, and this is the first fruit. I was so shocked when she sent me this picture because this little mango tree is putting out its first mango, which is just hilarious how that size tree could put out that size of a mango. It's like a normal size mango. But so I should know exactly how many hundreds of trees there are, but we've co-funded this project with this woman. She's actually now the vice chancellor of the Malawi Adventist University. She's an American. She was a professor at another university teaching international development, and she plans to retire in Malawi. And so she's hiring a lot of local people. And then the plan is that when this, it's, I think, cashew and, what was the other? A macadamia nut and mango farm. And when it starts really producing well, our idea is that this would be the funding source for Farms to Malawi. And our hope is to be able to do more of that, where we're creating self-sustaining funding sources in the countries where we're working. So yeah, so that's kind of the overview of our freedoms, and that's what we're trying to lead to is freedom. We do have all this on e-learning, so people from around the world can actually take the course for free. And so we really encourage that, and we're switching platforms so we can more easily do it in multiple languages. We have just English and Spanish right now, but we switched to a new platform just in the last month and are testing it. One that has a mobile app, because a lot of people in developing countries don't have a computer, but they may have a smartphone. So if we can do something on an app, more people can learn. So if people want to take it, they can do the little QR code. And I'm wrapping up here. What can you do? You were like thinking there's 3 billion people that don't have enough to eat, That's kind of overwhelming and can be disempowering. But I love this quote. It says, though your resources may not be sufficient to feed thousands, they may suffice to feed one. In the hand of Christ, they may feed many. Like the disciples, give what you have, and Christ will multiply the gift. And so Chris and I were talking about the loaves and the fishes, and that story where 5,000 people were fed. It had to pass through the hands of the disciples. He could have just snapped his finger and everybody showed up with their own plate, but there was a choice to pass it through the hands of other people to share with the people. So yeah, so I love what I'm doing. It's really a dream come true. I learned about wash issues from my dad when I was back in high school and was shocked to realize that there was people that couldn't take a bath or take a shower or get clean water, people that didn't have latrines. And so I learned about that 30 plus years ago, and it just stuck with me ever since. And so studying nutrition and and then, then being working for the federal government, and then becoming a mom, and really doing real health and human services. I was with health and human services in the government, but then, being a mom is the real health and human services every day, 24/7. And so I never imagined that I would get to start something like this that's growing like this. And it's been such a blessing. And it's fun to tell people about. Honestly, the newsletters that I passed out, or Krista passed out, we share those every quarter so that all of our donors and supporters know what's going on. And I think that's part of the fun of this work, is just passing on the true stories of what's really happening and the impact that it's making around the world. So I just want to appreciate you guys for coming and hearing some of these stories. And I want to appreciate people that are watching, if you're still on, for listening. And yeah, I just want to open it up for questions or comments or anything you want. And then we'll, call it a night. So.
Are you thinking of moving into other countries?
Yeah, we're actually, I have this Excel spreadsheet, and actually this morning I was on the phone with Burkina Faso and another guy in the Philippines. Our program in the Philippines hasn't grown quite like we wanted to this year. And Stephen called me tonight with this guy that he's really wanted to hire. So we're hoping to go there. And then we're actually writing a grant right now for Burundi and Chad as well. And I'll also have to say, I looked at the statistics. Elizabeth, who was in the upper corner, she sent me the statistics on Burkina Faso, and she used to work in Burkina Faso and Burundi. And according to the World Health Organization statistic that I looked at this morning, 85% of the children die before their 5th birthday in that country. I mean, I've never seen anything like that anywhere.
So who would you be talking to in a new country?
So honestly, I have different partners in different places, but I will say that one of the connections has been the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So there's 9 million, probably 10 million by now, members of the church in sub-Saharan Africa alone. So it's like a lot more prevalent than even here, although we do have our little Saturday group here. You guys are welcome to come check out anytime. We start at 9. But yeah, so the guy I was talking to in Burkina Faso today is the head of the church there. And what's really interesting is Elizabeth used to work there, and there's a lot of doctors and nurses and health professionals there that are Seventh-day Adventist members. But there's not like the church has historically had a health message that's been kind of integrated in part of the teachings of the church from the beginning, which is kind of funny because at the start their health message was sort of thought of as being out there a little bit, but now science has kind of caught up with a lot of what has been taught now for 100 and some years, and it's really been validated as very legitimate. I don't know, have any of you heard of the blue zones? So you have, okay, so they're like hot spots of health and longevity around the world. And it was found by National Geographic. There's a researcher named Dan Buettner with National Geographic. And he found 5 places. He was sent out, just to find where are hot spots of health and longevity in the world. And he found, of course, you guys have heard of the Greek, the Mediterranean diet that leads to health and well-being. And then there's these Japanese women in Okinawa. And then there's one in Costa Rica, and there's one in, Greece and Sardinia, Italy. Those are both kind of Mediterranean. So those are 5 of them. The 5th one was Loma Linda, California. And that's a place where there's a huge concentration of Seventh-day Adventists. And what's interesting about those blue zones is they, all of the other ones are basically being eliminated just as people adapt and have more, processed foods and less traditional cultures, because those are some of the elements that lead to abundant life. And the Loma Linda group is actually growing. And so part of what I felt like when I first started this was, why can't there be a blue zone anywhere in the world where people adopt the practices that lead to abundant life? So that's kind of how the Farm Stew recipe is informed, is looking at some of the research around blue zones. I mean, in a simplified way. So that's why kind of connecting with the Seventh-day Adventists, you can kind of tell that story. And then a lot of the teachings, because we're like gleaning them from the Bible. I mean, even like in Leviticus, like this, or like Exodus, when Moses brought the people out of Egypt, there was all these rules about sanitation and health and, you know, even like defecation. If you defecate, you have to bury it. That's all in the Bible. You're never going to hear a sermon on it, but it's all in the Bible. So when you like teach from that same mentality, there's like kind of a high rate of adoption, but then they go out and they can teach it. And like where I started the program in Uganda, it was an 80% Muslim area, and they love it because like their creation narrative is pretty similar to the Bible creation narrative. And so when you start in the garden and you say, you know, God was a farmer, he put us in the garden, like the Muslims are like, cool, you know. And so we find like points of common ground. I mean, even alcohol, like the Muslims are, you know, technically not supposed to do that either. Pork, stuff like that. So you try to like find those common elements that would kind of give them a hook to like understand that, you know, hey, we're talking about the same things that are going to benefit your children too. So yeah, so that's how it's worked. But I was working with the Rotarians in Uganda. I think I mentioned this before, and they were actually got really excited about it too. So we have different groups. They got excited about it, and we were working on a global grant. But then there was certain Rotarians that were like all on board about it, and then there was a couple others that were very, very powerful that wanted everything routed to their uncles, cousins, brothers. And so we just didn't feel like it was going down right, so we stopped, and then I moved here. So, but I do hope we can work with the Rotarians. Like I've talked with the clubs in a club in Malawi, and then there's another one in Juba, South Sudan, that would be really fun to work with because there's so much common ground with Rotary. So that was a very long answer, but now everybody's going to be afraid to ask a question. Sorry. Any other thoughts or? All right.
I'm not a late night person, but this was really interesting. Thank you for doing it.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thanks for coming again. And yeah, there's lots more food, and like we said, we don't shut it down here. So, yeah. So I just want to appreciate it. Greg, did you have something? Okay, I thought maybe you were volunteering to say a little closing prayer. How about? Sure. By the way, Greg is Nathan's dad, and he's our head elder here. So, and he's also the head farmer here. So he's very appropriate to be part of Farm Stew.
It's been a blessing to have Joy come and live on the farm here and meet her and see what she's doing, because it really fits with a lot of our vision here. Like, we need connection with the land and with one another, and to help each other learn how to live off the land again, because we're so separated from it. So it's been a blessing to have her come and share what she's doing around the world. So we're blessed. And that's what this place is about here. At the trading post is like, how can we support the local farmers and gardeners and people that want to live a healthy lifestyle. So that's what we're doing here, is trying to educate ourselves. We've been blessed with 130 acres out here, so we grow a lot of our food. That's why I don't know a lot of your faces, because we never leave the farm. Because we grow most of the food we need here, and then we have the trading post, which is a lot going on with people. So, no offense, not like we don't like to meet new people, but we're pretty, so it's great to have you here. And yeah, we always want to just pause and remember the Creator that gave us the gifts. So God, thank you Thank you for the gift of life, and thank you for the gift of this land that you've given us and our family to grow up here in this wonderful community in Paonia and this whole valley. So many gardeners, organic gardeners and farmers and people that want to have a good lifestyle. So we're so grateful, God, that you've given us life and each one of us to share it with, and your amazing recipe for abundant life. You are calling us to live an abundant life. Thank you for that. And I pray blessing over Joy and Farm Stew and all this community, because we have such a rich life here. We're so blessed to live where we live. God, help us to share it. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, God.
Yeah.
All right, and I'm just going to take everybody, wave to the crowd if anybody's still watching us. Thank you. Good night.